What's up, guys? I'm Dan Langan, and this is Dan Can Bake It, where every week Food Network is throwing me a crazy cake challenge that I've got to pull off. I have a new clue here, a new box, fresh from Food Network. Let's check it out and see what's inside. The clue's like on the outside of the box. It says, pull here. It's a pretty light box. Looks like tulle. I want to open it up and see what it actually is. It's a wedding ring, so I think it's either an engagement cake or a wedding cake. All right, so there's a clue in here. Let's see. Make a wedding cake under $100. This is like a joke because it takes hours and hours and hours to make a wedding cake. If you're like in a big city, a wedding cake's probably like $2 grand, $5 grand. Some people spend like $10,000 on wedding cakes. So I'm not sure if I can pull this cake off for under $100, but this is Dan Can Bake It. I've got a reputation uphold. I know you guys are expecting something awesome, so we'll see if I can pull it off. All right, guys, so I'm gonna get started on the batter for this wedding cake. And what I'm actually gonna do is flavor it with some orange zest. I think that's a really solid idea because I can use just a couple oranges to flavor this cake, and it'll give me lots of flavor, and I'll still stick with the budget. So what I'm gonna do is mix this cake, starting with all of the dry ingredients. So the first thing I'm gonna put in my mixer is some sugar, just some plain granulated white sugar. And then I also have some cake flour. I love cake flour in cake recipes because I think it makes a really tender cake, which is super important when you're looking to make a wedding cake. So I also have some baking powder, some salt. So I also have some baking soda here. That's gonna give the cake a nice golden color on the outside. So I'll whisk this all together just so it falls through the sieve. Now I'm just gonna put this on my mixer. Now I'm gonna move on to my wet ingredients. And what I love about this recipe is that the butter starts melted. There's no question about how soft the butter is. There's no thought of, did I cream the butter enough? Is the butter too hard? Is the butter too soft? The butter starts out as liquid. I have some sour cream. I also have some buttermilk, some vegetable oil. So I've got some large eggs, plus an egg yolk, some vanilla extract, and then my orange zest. So I'll turn my mixer back on low. So I've got some 6-inch cake pans. So for a 6-inch cake, I'll divide this into 3. It's just a little bit more than a pound of batter into each pan. So these are all ready to go. I have my oven preheated to 335 degrees. So now that my 6-inch cakes are in the oven, I'll let them bake. While they're cooling, I'm gonna make this recipe 2 more times. That'll fill my 8-inch cake pans, and it's also gonna fill my 4-inch cake pans. That will be the top tier of my wedding cake. All right, so I've baked off enough cake for 3 tiers. I have my 4-inch cake layers, my 6-inch cake layers, and my 8-inch cake layers. They're almost cool, so while they finish up cooling, I'm gonna get started on my buttercream. The first thing I'm gonna do is add some powdered confectioner sugar to my bowl. I like to start off with sifted confectioner sugar, so I'm going to add to my powdered sugar some pasteurized egg whites. These are those egg whites that you find in the grocery store in the egg section. They come in a carton. I also have some vanilla extract here for flavor and some salt. I'm just gonna turn this on low at first. All right, let's take a look at this meringue here. Oh yeah, I can tell already it's done. It's really stiff. I just saw like 4 peaks stand up when I raised this whisk up. There you go. And to my right here, I have some really soft, unsalted butter. So we'll mix this on low. So this buttercream looks beautiful, and I know it's gonna be good because there's a lot of butter in here. I'm gonna use this buttercream to fill my cake and also frost it, but when I frost the cakes, I'm going for just barely a crumb coat of icing. And that's actually perfect for this because if I use less buttercream on the outside of the cake, I need less butter, which means hopefully I can stay under $100. So I'll grab my first 8-inch layer. It's nice and cool and I've already trimmed them up. So now to get a nice even layer of buttercream, what I'm gonna do is hold my bag right above my cake as I turn my turntable and squeeze the bag, and I'll get a ring of buttercream right here, and then I'll just follow that all the way towards the center. So I have this full layer of buttercream on here. I'll lay my second cake down, 1 more layer of buttercream. Okay, last layer. Now what I'm gonna do is overload the sides of this cake with buttercream, and then after all of the cake's covered, I'll just scrape all of that buttercream off. So I'm going for this plastic scraper, and I'm just gonna hold the scraper and just scrape around until that cake starts to show through. This is what I would call a really rustic finish on a cake, but the beauty of this entire like nearly naked finish is in its imperfection. So you kind of just have to embrace the imperfection and go with it. I actually think that looks perfect. I don't want to mess with it anymore. So I have a 6-inch layer now. So this tier is looking really good. So I've got a 3-inch cake board here. It's a little guy, I don't think they come any smaller than this. I'll put some buttercream on that. So I'll just backfill any gaps with just a little bit more buttercream here. I think I need some right up here. Pop this in the fridge, I'll let this get really cold. So I'm going to be creating some gum paste flowers that are gonna cascade down the side of my wedding cake. So I'm gonna be making some sugar roses and some sugar peonies, and I'll get started with the roses because they're a little bit more labor intensive. So I have some light pink gum paste here, and what I'm going to do is roll it out and cut out each rose petal individually. So I've got a non-stick rolling pin here, and I'll roll this out. So now here I have a 1.5 inch styrofoam ball. I have it on a piece of floral wire, and then I also have a large skewer at the top, which is a trick that I think is really helpful in assembling these flowers. I'm gonna use the skewer as a center base to coil that inner petal around so I get a nice tight center. So I have some teardrop cutters. For the very center, I need a petal that's a little bit larger, so I'll cut that out. So I'll start with my center largest petal. I'll put it on my foam mat here. I have my ball tool, and what I'm gonna do is just thin the edges. I'm just running this ball tool halfway kind of on the foam and then halfway on the gum paste, just all the way around until it gets nice and thin and nice and frilly. So these start to curl up and cup and look like a nice natural petal. So at this point, I have to let these dry for about 3 to 4 minutes in that cupped shape. Plastic spoons here, but of course metal spoons would work as well. So I just line these up and then I just use the cupped shape of the spoon to allow the petals to dry in a nice, gentle cupped kind of formation. So just like this, let these dry just like that. Okay, so these rose petals have had a chance to dry for a little bit. They're still flexible, but they're holding their shape when I hold them up. That's what I'm looking for. So I'll pick my center back up. And a really important step here is to make sure that that center little swirl is lower than this first row of petals. Just make sure everything's pressed nicely into place. I'll curl these back just a little bit more if I have to. So you guys can see how much time it takes to put these flowers together. With this challenge, I have to create this wedding cake with only $100. So I can't go spending, $50 on fresh flowers, which is probably what I would end up spending to cover a cake. So the trade-off here is my time. I'm just taking the time to make all these sugar flowers from scratch and saving a couple bucks. My sugar flowers have had a chance to dry. I finished assembling them. So what I wanna do now is dust them with just a little bit of color dust just to really bring them to life. So what I wanna do is take a fan brush and just a little bit of pink color and just barely touch the top of the flower or the top of the petal with some dust. And this looks like such a minor detail, but when you see these flowers up close, it makes all the difference. So this powdered food color, it's basically just a dry, food-safe color pigment, and it sticks really well to this gum paste, so it adds some nice color variation. So all you need is just a touch, just to really bring the flower to life. And I really like a fan brush for this because it kind of makes a nice, messy, nice, uneven touch with the dusting, so it looks even more natural, I think. So with all this petal dust, I think I'm fudging it a little bit with my $100 budget, but I already had a few of these colors in my pantry. I like to keep them around, make it have a really nice impact. Despite the fact that it's a smaller cake, it's still gonna look beautiful with all of these gorgeously colored flowers cascading down the sides. So my goal in making this cake for under $100 was to make a 3-tier cake, but make the smallest size 3-tier cake I could. So that way I had to buy less butter, less cake flour, less vanilla extract. The butter, the vanilla, all of those things, they get really expensive. So I still have a 3-tier cake. It's just a little smaller and it comes in under budget. So I've got my 8-inch cake here. I'm gonna add 6 straws to this because I'm putting a 6-inch tier right on top of it. So I'll mark the center with my 1 straw here. And then I'll mark off 6 spaces. So basically my rule for supporting a cake is to just figure out the size tier that's going on top of the straws. In this instance, it's a 6-inch tier, so I just have 6 straws formed kind of in a circle towards the center of my 8-inch bottom tier. So I'm gonna pick my 6-inch tier up with a larger spatula, place it right on top of my 8-inch bottom tier, try and center that. So this is super cold, so I'm just gonna put my fingers right on top. It looks perfect. I have my small tier cake, I have the sugar flowers that I spent hours putting together, so now all that's left to do is arrange those flowers all the way down my cake. So I want the top of the cake to look like it has the largest, heaviest group, the most beautiful group of flowers that's gonna cascade down the side. So this rose is pretty heavy, so I'm actually gonna start with this. right at the top here. Just press that straight down. And then maybe I'll go with a peony right at the side here. I'll put this maybe right there. Stick this straight in just like this. I'm actually gonna go for a hydrangea. The other great thing about sugar flowers is that they totally last forever. So instead of wasting money on fresh flowers, which is like so tempting for a project like this, I can just create these sugar flowers and literally I'll have them forever, which to me is awesome because the amount of time it takes to create these is just like so unsurpassed than anything else in the cake world. So, and then I'll take this and I'll insert it right at the top just to add some real height to finish this off. This is a slow process, but at some point you have to know when to stop. So I think this looks really good. So Food Network probably thought they could stump me by challenging me to make a wedding cake for under 100 bucks, but I think I got the last word on this one because they might not know it, but obviously I'm pretty proficient when it comes to sugar flowers. So I was able to get all of my ingredients for under $100, and I just pulled out my mad sugar flower skills, made all these beautiful flowers, and I made this gorgeous cake that is fit to be like in any bridal magazine or any high-end wedding. Made the entire thing for under 100 bucks. All right, guys, cue the wedding music because I'm about to cut up this wedding cake. It's all about the beauty of the first slice. Let's go for a taste. So good. The crumb on this is beautiful. It cuts so nicely. I think this is like the epitome of a wedding cake. It's got a beautiful flavor and it looks gorgeous just sitting on the plate just like that. All right, guys, let me know in the comments below if you'd be crazy enough to attempt making your own wedding cake. Don't forget to subscribe to Food Network on YouTube. And while you're at it, check back next week for my next cake challenge.